You spend your whole life becoming someone: a son, a daughter, a student, a professional, a friend, a role. You collect identities like layers of clothing, each one carefully chosen, each one designed to fit. But underneath all of that, who are you? Not the roles you play, not the masks you wear, not the version of yourself you've built to survive in the world. Who are you when no one is watching? Carl Jung spent his life answering this question, and he called the journey toward that answer individuation. It's the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the fragmented parts of yourself into one authentic being. This isn't about self-improvement, it's about self-discovery, and it might be the most important journey you ever take. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who revolutionized our understanding of the human psyche. He believed that deep within each of us lies a blueprint, a potential self. Jung called it the self, with a capital S. Not the ego, not the persona, but something deeper, more complete. The self is who you were always meant to be, before the world told you who to be, before you learned to conform, before you built walls around the parts of yourself that didn't fit. And individuation is the process of returning to that original wholeness. But here's the problem. From the moment you're born, the world shapes you. Your parents, your culture, your society, they all have expectations. You learn quickly what's rewarded and what's punished, what's acceptable and what's not. So you adapt, you conform, you hide the parts of yourself that don't fit the script. Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear to navigate the world. And it's necessary. You need it to function, to belong, to survive. But if you never take the mask off, you forget there's a face underneath. Individuation is the process of remembering. It's the journey from the false self to the true self, from who you pretend to be to who you actually are. And Jung believed this wasn't optional. It was the central task of the second half of life, because you can only perform for so long before something inside you breaks, before the question becomes unbearable: is this really all I am? Individuation doesn't begin with light, it begins with darkness. The first stage of the journey is confronting what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is everything you've rejected about yourself, every emotion you've deemed unacceptable, every impulse you've buried, every trait you've disowned. It's the anger you won't feel, the jealousy you won't admit, the selfishness you pretend doesn't exist. You think you're a good person, and maybe you are. But the shadow doesn't care about your self-image. It's everything you've pushed into the unconscious to maintain that image. And here's what Jung discovered. The shadow doesn't go away when you ignore it. It just operates in the dark. It leaks out in passive aggression, in projection, in self-sabotage, in the inexplicable choices you make that go against your own best interests. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So individuation demands that you face it, not to destroy it, not to indulge it, but to integrate it, because the shadow isn't your enemy. It's a part of you that's been abandoned, and it carries tremendous power. When you bring the shadow into the light, something shifts. You stop projecting your darkness onto others. You stop judging so harshly. You become more honest, more whole. more real. The anger you wouldn't feel becomes healthy boundaries. The sadness you buried becomes deep empathy. The selfishness you denied becomes the ability to honor your own needs. This is the first test of individuation, and it's brutal because it asks you to see yourself clearly, without the filter of who you wish you were. Jung believed that most people spend their entire lives running from this confrontation, but the ones who don't, they discover something extraordinary, that on the other side of your darkness is your power. Once you face the shadow, the journey deepens. The next stage is encountering what Jung called the Anima and the Animus. These are the inner figures that represent the opposite gender within you. For men, it's the anima, the feminine aspect of the psyche, the capacity for emotion, intuition, receptivity, connection. For women, it's the animus, the masculine aspect, the capacity for logic, assertion, independence, strength. Jung believed that we're all born with both masculine and feminine energies, but society teaches us to suppress one and express the other. Men are taught to be strong, rational, unemotional. So they bury their sensitivity, their vulnerability, their capacity to nurture. Women are taught to be soft, accommodating, emotional. So they bury their assertiveness, their ambition, their capacity for leadership. But individuation requires balance. It asks men to reclaim their anima, to feel deeply, to connect authentically, to stop performing strength and start embodying presence. It asks women to reclaim their animus, to speak boldly, to pursue their goals unapologetically, to stop shrinking and start expanding. This isn't about becoming androgynous. It's about becoming whole. Because when you integrate your opposite, you stop projecting it onto others. Ever wondered why you're attracted to someone? Jung would say, because they carry the qualities you've disowned. The man who falls for the emotionally expressive woman is often trying to reclaim his own repressed feeling. The woman who falls for the confident, decisive man is often trying to reclaim her own repressed power. But projection always fails, because you can't find wholeness through another person. You can only find it within yourself. When you integrate the anima or animus, relationships transform. You stop needing your partner to complete you. You stop demanding they carry what you won't own. Instead, you meet them as equals. Two whole people, not two halves desperately searching for completion. This is the second test of individuation, and it asks you to embrace the parts of yourself you were taught to reject. The softness, the strength, the capacity to be both. Because true wholeness isn't one-dimensional. It's the integration of all that you are. After you've faced the shadow, after you've integrated your opposite, the journey arrives at its center. Jung called it the self, not the ego, not the persona, but the totality of who you are, the organizing principle of your entire psyche. The self is what you've been searching for all along. It's the sense of inner coherence, the feeling that all your fragmented parts have finally come together, that you're no longer at war with yourself. But here's the paradox. You can't create the self. You can only uncover it, because it was always there, beneath the roles, beneath the masks, beneath the conditioning. Individuation isn't about adding, It's about removing, stripping away everything that isn't truly you until only the essence remains. Jung believed that the self often reveals itself in symbols, in dreams, in moments of profound insight or synchronicity. It's the feeling of finally coming home to yourself, of recognizing something you've always known but forgotten. And when you encounter the self, life changes, not because your external circumstances shift, but because your internal relationship to them does. You stop seeking validation from the outside. You stop living for approval. You stop betraying yourself to belong. Because you found the center, and from that center you can navigate anything. This doesn't mean you become isolated or arrogant or disconnected. It means you become authentic. You show up as who you actually are, not who you think you should be, not who others want you to be, just you. And Jung believed this was the ultimate freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, not freedom from difficulty, but freedom from pretending. This is the heart of individuation. The moment you stop becoming someone else's idea of who you should be and start becoming who you truly are. It's not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of living from your center. So what happens if you never individuate? What happens if you spend your entire life playing roles, wearing masks, living for others? Jung had a word for it: inflation, or its opposite, alienation. You either become completely identified with your persona, believing you are the role you play, or you become completely disconnected from yourself, living like a ghost in your own life. The inflated person believes they are their achievements, their status, their image. When that's threatened, they collapse because there's nothing underneath. The alienated person feels hollow, lost, like they're watching their life from the outside. They have everything they're supposed to want, but none of it feels real. Jung called this the midlife crisis, but it's not really about age. It's about the moment when the persona cracks, when you can no longer sustain the performance, when the question becomes unbearable: who am I when I stop pretending? And for many, this moment never comes. They push through, they double down, they die without ever knowing themselves. But for others, it's the wake-up call, the invitation to finally begin the journey inward, to stop running, to stop performing, to start individuating. Individuation is a choice, and it's one of the hardest choices you'll ever make, because it requires you to let go of who you thought you were, to discover who you actually are. But the cost of not choosing: a life half lived, a self never known. So let's bring it together. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. It begins with facing your shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected, integrating them, owning them, so they no longer control you from the dark. It continues with embracing your anima or animus, the opposite within you, reclaiming the qualities you've disowned, becoming whole, not one-sided. It deepens with encountering the self, the center of your being, the authentic you that was always there, waiting beneath the masks. And it demands a choice: to stop living for others and start living from your center. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you approval. This isn't self-improvement, it's self-recovery. It's the journey from fragmentation to wholeness, from performance to presence, from who you pretend to be to who you are. And here's the truth Jung understood. You don't have forever to figure this out. Life is short, and most of it is spent pretending. But you can stop. Right now, you can begin the journey home. So I'll leave you with this. Who are you beneath all the roles you play? And what would it take to finally become that person? If this resonated with you, subscribe and keep watching. We're exploring the mind and transforming lives, one insight at a time. Thanks for being here.